The realm of Verr'alah had never known peace. For centuries, werewolves and vampires fought, their blood staining the very soil. On the night of the blood moon, Lira, the weakest member of her pack, hid away in the forest, hoping to escape the wrath of her tormentors. But something strange happened as she stared at the moon. Her wolf stirred in a way it never had before, as if responding to an ancient call. Her fated mate was near. That's when she saw him, Vincent, the vampire prince. His silver eyes locked on hers, and Lira felt the unmistakable pull of a bond. But how could this be? A werewolf and a vampire. The forbidden nature of their connection sent chills down her spine. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a bond that could either bring peace or destroy everything she knew. Lyra's heart raced as Vincent approached her, his gaze sharp, assessing. There was something dangerous about him, but also a strange comfort in his presence. "You feel it too, don't you?" Vincent's voice was low, almost a whisper. Lyra's wolf responded, urging her to move closer, but her human mind screamed for her to run. This was madness. Werewolves and vampires were enemies. "How can this be?" Lira asked, her voice shaking. Vincent studied her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know, but we can't ignore it." The moonlight illuminated the connection between them, and despite their deep-rooted hatred, the pull of fate was undeniable. However, their union could ignite a war greater than any Verra'lah had seen. Lyra's world shattered the moment she realized the depth of her bond with Vincent. Being a runt in her pack already made her an outcast, but being mated to a vampire prince, that was a death sentence. As she snuck back into the pack's territory under the cloak of night, she couldn't shake the weight of what had just happened. Vincent, on the other hand, faced his own dilemma. As a prince, he was expected to lead his people, to uphold the vampire's long-standing disdain for werewolves. How could he tell his father that his fated mate was a werewolf? Both knew that revealing their bond would ignite centuries-old conflicts, but neither could walk away. Their worlds were too tightly intertwined now. Days passed, but Lira couldn't forget Vincent. Each time she closed her eyes, his face was there. She knew it was dangerous to meet with him again, but the bond was impossible to resist. One evening, while the pack was gathered around the bonfire, Lira slipped away into the forest. Her wolf led her to a familiar spot, and there he stood, waiting. Vincent's eyes were soft, filled with an understanding that made Lyra's chest ache. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered, but her words held no conviction. Vincent stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I can't stay away from you, Lira, not anymore." As the moon cast shadows around them, they realized they had to decide: continue to live in secret or reveal their bond and face the consequences.
Rumors of strange movements in the forest began to spread through Verr'alah. Lyra's pack grew suspicious, especially her alpha, a brutal leader named Kale. "The vampires are plotting something," he growled one evening. Tension was rising, and Lira feared what might happen if the truth of her bond was discovered. Vincent, too, noticed the shift in the vampire kingdom. His father, King Oren, had ordered increased patrols, fearing an attack from the werewolves. Vincent knew it was only a matter of time before both sides clashed. But what neither of them knew was that a third force was at play, one that sought to exploit their forbidden bond to destroy both species. Lira and Vincent agreed to meet secretly, but the weight of their connection became unbearable. Their growing bond began to affect them physically, making it harder to resist the pull. Each meeting was a dangerous gamble, and the slightest mistake could spell doom for them both. But as Lira prepared to sneak away once again, she felt her alpha's eyes on her. Kale had been watching her closely. He had his suspicions, and it was only a matter of time before Lyra's secret would be revealed. "Where do you go at night, Runt?" he asked one evening, cornering her by the river. Lyra's pulse quickened as she tried to lie, but Kale was no fool. She had to tread carefully. Her next move could determine not just her fate but that of the entire pack. Vincent faced his own challenges within the vampire kingdom. His father, King Oren, was growing suspicious of his late-night absences. The tension between the werewolves and vampires was on the brink of exploding, and Oren wanted to strike first. But Vincent knew that war would destroy everything, including his bond with Lyra. One night, as Vincent returned from meeting Lyra, he was confronted by his best friend, a vampire named Silas. "I know what you're hiding, Vincent," Silas said, his voice filled with accusation. "You're risking everything for a werewolf." Vincent's blood ran cold. If Silas revealed the truth, his position as prince, and his relationship with Lyra, would be in jeopardy. Back in the werewolf pack, Lyra's situation was growing increasingly perilous. Alpha Kale had begun questioning her more frequently, and her nervousness wasn't helping her keep her secret. But when Kale announced a hunt, Lyra knew this wasn't just any hunt. He was planning to invade vampire territory, setting the stage for an all-out war. Lyra couldn't let this happen. She had to warn Vincent. But slipping out unnoticed during the hunt would be next to impossible. As she struggled to come up with a plan, her wolf grew restless, sensing the danger that loomed on the horizon. Vincent and Lyra's next meeting was more urgent than ever. "My father is preparing to strike," Vincent whispered, his eyes filled with worry. "And Kale is planning an attack too," Lyra replied, her voice shaking. "We have to stop them." They both knew that peace would be impossible if their leaders went to war. But convincing their people to stand down would require a miracle, especially with the centuries of bloodshed between their races. Still, they made a pact. They would do whatever it took to stop the fighting, even if it meant revealing their forbidden bond. As Vincent and Lyra plotted to avert disaster, a new threat began to emerge in the shadows. A rogue faction of vampires and werewolves, disillusioned with their leaders, was gathering strength. They didn't want peace. They wanted to see both kingdoms burn. Led by a vicious vampire named Vane and a bloodthirsty werewolf named Thorn, the rogue forces had been plotting in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If they succeeded, they could ignite a war that would engulf the entire realm of Verr'alah. Lira and Vincent had no idea that their plans to prevent war were being countered by an even deadlier threat. Lira made a daring decision. She would sneak into vampire territory to meet with Vincent's father, King Oren, and plead for peace. It was a dangerous mission, but she couldn't let the two races tear each other apart. Disguising her scent and masking her fear, she crossed enemy lines under the cover of darkness. In the vampire stronghold, Vincent waited nervously. He knew what Lira was risking, and if anything went wrong, their entire plan could crumble. As she approached the vampire court, she steeled herself. She was about to walk into the lion's den. Lira stood before King Oren, her heart pounding in her chest. The vampire king regarded her with cold suspicion. "A werewolf dares to enter my court," he growled. "Why should I not kill you where you stand?" Lira fought the urge to flee. "Because if you do, it will be the end of both our people," she said, her voice strong despite her fear. She explained the growing threat of the rogue faction and the need for unity. Vincent watched from the shadows, praying his father would listen. But Oren was a hardened ruler, and his trust was not easily earned. Meanwhile, Kale gathered the pack's elders for a war council. He was preparing to lead an invasion into vampire territory, confident that his wolves could overwhelm the bloodsuckers. Lira had tried to warn him, but Kale's lust for power was too strong. As Lira and Vincent fought to prevent war, the rogue forces were already making their move. Vane and Thorn had infiltrated both the werewolf and vampire camps, sowing seeds of discord. Their plan was simple: let the two races destroy each other, and then claim the ashes for themselves. Just as Lira thought she had gained a glimmer of hope from King Orin, disaster struck. The rogue faction launched a surprise attack on both the Vampire Kingdom and the Werewolf Pack simultaneously. Chaos erupted as werewolves and vampires clashed in the forests of Verr'alah. Lira and Vincent were caught in the middle of the battle, desperately trying to keep their people from killing each other. But the bloodshed was too much. In the confusion, Lira was captured by Vane, and Vincent was forced to flee. Their bond was tested like never before as the rogues unleashed their full fury. Lira awoke in a dark, cold cell. Her hands were bound, and she could hear the echoes of distant screams. Vane's sinister voice cut through the darkness. "You thought you could bring peace, foolish wolf. You and your vampire prince will watch as your precious kingdoms burn." Vincent, injured and desperate, had retreated to safety, but his thoughts were consumed with Lyra's fate. He had to find her, but with the battle raging and his father's armies on the move, his options were limited. He needed allies and fast. Vincent turned to the unlikeliest of allies, a vampire outcast named Celine and a rebellious werewolf warrior named Jax. Both had been wronged by their respective leaders and had no loyalty to either side. They agreed to help Vincent rescue Lira, but their motives were far from pure. Together, they ventured into the rogue faction's hidden fortress, a dark stronghold nestled in the cursed mountains of Verr'alah. Time was running out, and Vincent knew that if they didn't act soon, Lira and their entire world would be lost. The air was thick with tension as Vincent, Celine, and Jax moved deeper into the rogue faction's lair. Every step felt like a gamble. The rogue vampires and werewolves patrolled the grounds heavily, but Celine's knowledge of the fortress kept them hidden. In the heart of the mountain, they found Lira, beaten but alive. "Vincent," she whispered, relief flooding her eyes as he freed her from the chains. But their escape was far from assured. As they made their way out, Thorn appeared, his eyes burning with rage. "You won't leave here alive," he snarled. Thorn lunged at Vincent, but Jax intercepted him, engaging in a vicious battle. "Get her out of here," Jax shouted, his claws tearing into Thorn's flesh. Celine and Vincent led Lira through the winding corridors, dodging enemy patrols. They could hear the roars of battle echoing through the fortress as Jax held off Thorn.